The first 4-day workweek pilot, which started on the 1st of March, ends this month. The project reveals that South African companies aren't as progressive as their global counterparts about the 4-day work week. For more information on the story, we're joined by Karen Lowe, who is the director of 4-Day Week SA. Karen, good evening. Thanks for your time. So, of the face of it, of course, this is something that we can all vouch for, a 4-day week. Everybody needs an extra day to their weekend. But of course, in productivity and practical terms, there are some concessions that companies have to put in place to ensure they're not losing on productivity and efficiency in order to implement this.
Hi, Kathy. Good evening, and thank you for having me. Yes, indeed. It's been an exciting time, and having listened to the news cycle that you've just been on, I think the 4-day week is worth talking about, don't you? I mean, we could all do with that extra day off a week from work. But South Africa has some unique challenges, and we were listening to load shedding stories about load shedding, and we've had a taxi strike, and we've got some very unique socio-economic conditions. And I think the midway data that you're referring to, where perhaps it doesn't look as positive as other global data, I think by the end of the survey, when we get the results out in September, we will be pretty close to what the global markets are showing. But what is interesting to note is that the 4-day week model that everybody is working towards in this pilot is the 100-80-100 model. So it's 100% pay for 80% time in return for 100% productivity. And it's really important for us to understand this because the productivity is all about outputs. This is a productivity experiment at the heart of it. So in order to get the work week reduced by 20%, you can imagine just how much planning and scheduling one needs to do. And then you add load shedding into the mix and everything else that we have to deal with in the country. You realize that some of our participants have actually done surprisingly well. And what we are also seeing is that the 12-month data coming out of other global studies it's not something you switch on, Kathy. It is something that you progress towards. And a lot of the organizations that have done this for 12 months, 18 months, indeed 36 months around the world, are getting ever closer to that 20% reduced work week mark. So I think South African organizations are doing exceptionally well. We've got 28 plus one Botswanan company that have participated in the first trial, and it hasn't been without its challenges. Make no mistake. It is not something that's easy to do. You have to plan for it. You have to try and test. You have to fail really, really, really fast and try more and optimize and refine. But for a 6-month experiment as an initial trial into can a reduced work week work, I think we're showing some pretty good results. And those well-being scores, reduction in staff absenteeism, reduction in burnout, stress, etc., have all been tracking the same as global. So even though we might not be getting to the full 20% reduction in the work week, I am very, very optimistic and encouraged by the results that we've had so far in the midway.
Karen, one of the things that we've seen in particular, the private sector post-COVID-19 is that because a lot of companies had moved into a hybrid model of working, they've retained that to a certain extent. People have, I suppose, in some companies, a much more flexible working structure. Now, what that also means is that some people, of course, are finding themselves having a longer work day than they would ordinarily have. How does this contribute to the 4-day work week, where we know that if you're coming into the office, you start at 8:30 and you leave at 4:00, you're done. Whereas if you're working from home, if you have flexible working hours, that tends to creep into what would ordinarily have fallen under overtime.
Kathy, you're absolutely right, and I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of actually misunderstanding what the 4-day week is all about. So what you're speaking about is flexible work or hybrid work, or indeed just sort of flexible work practices where organizations have allowed individuals to come in at certain times of the week, perhaps on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But if you look at the overall work week, you are still working 5 days a week, and in some instances, more. So the 4-day week is a work time reduction. It is not the same as flexible work. It is the ultimate flexible work practice, if you want to put it that way. We're actually saying to organizations, can you reduce the work week by 20% In other words, if you work a 40-hour work week, can you reduce that work week to 32 hours? And that doesn't matter whether you're in the office. So it doesn't matter where you're working those 32 hours. The idea is to not go past those 32 hours. And while flexible work practices and return to office and hybrid and all of this is circulating around and businesses are grappling with this, the 4-day week really is about saying we can still achieve productivity and revenue gains in a reduced work week, not just flexible work or not just hybrid work policies. And there's a very, very important differentiation between what businesses understand as flexible work and what we are offering by way of experimentation in a reduced work week. And the gains are quite astonishing. And Kathy, it's important to differentiate, because if you look at compressed hours working, and perhaps organizations are giving their employees a Friday off, for example, what you often find in organizations is that the Monday through Thursday hours worked are 8, 9, 10-hour days. And if you actually dig below that data, you realize how unproductive people are in that length of workday. And then to touch on another point that you raised, yes, there is this always on sort of feeling if you're fully flexible. And we find that a lot of our remote workers find that work creeps into the day on a regular basis. So the 4-day work week really is about finding the best work time reduction model that suits you as an individual and that ensures that you continue to deliver productivity to the organization that you work for. And that could be a Friday off. It could be a Wednesday off, but it could also be 2 half days, and it could also be time off every single day. But the aim is the same regardless. You get to a reduced work week. So the time that you have at home with your family to exercise, to learn a new hobby, to perhaps go back to skill, to study, to even start a side hustle perhaps, would be there for you outside of that 32 hours that you give the work environment and the remaining hours to be able to give back to yourself and your family.
How have companies been able to do that, right? So what are they having to optimize in order to shave off that extra work time? Because here's the thing, right, Karen? If you finish whatever your tasks are earlier than you're supposed to, chances are you're only going to end up with more work on the table, not less. So, and of course, from a company perspective, it makes sense. Efficiency, optimization, that's what it's all about. So you're telling companies, look, you've got to get people to give 100% just so that they can spend an extra day not having to work. How are you finding the response to that?
Kathy, you know what? There is a time scarcity in everybody's lives, and I think there's something post-COVID that has taught us that we're able to do a lot more if we look for efficiencies of work. And one of the first places that organizations start is to understand where time is wasted, and time is often wasted by poor systems and processes, bad use of technology. I mean, Kathy, how many meetings about meetings do we have in the corporate world, especially in the knowledge worker base? It's about finding where the wasted time is. And chances are your 4-day week is already hidden under time wasted with inefficiencies and poor systems and processes. So organizations start there. They also, on the other side, say, what are the non-negotiables? What do we absolutely have to deliver at bare minimum? What would we like to deliver at productivity positive environment? And you take that, and the team then from the bottom up, and this is not a C-suite solution, and I must stress that as well. The workers and the employees are the ones that understand what they do from a day-to-day basis. They are the ones that are at the coalface. They're the ones that are doing that output and making sure that their working day is productive. If you challenge them within a universal incentive of time off, it's a gift. In fact, globally, they're calling it the gift of the fifth. So if you get a whole day off, whether that is taken as 2 half days or hours off, can you imagine how productive and efficient you can be when an entire team is focused on removing wasted time, focused on how to help each other and ensure those outputs are continuously produced. And the organization switches from a bums on seats mentality, you're busy because you're sitting there, to are you producing the output that this organization needs? And can we do that better than what we're currently doing in a reduced work week? And Kathy, the answer is an overwhelming yes. So if an organization puts that experimental hat on and goes, how can we do this? And they ask the staff, you would be amazed at how the solutions come to the fore if it is not mandated from the C-suite down or even from senior and middle management down. People buy into the idea of this is my time. I'm given permission to take it. This is not with strings attached. We're all playing for the same thing. We're playing for a work-life rebalance. And it's sorely needed. You know, there's more to life than working to death for a paycheck. There's more to life than celebrating overwork and having burnout as an occupational hazard. It's time that organizations really look to how they can be more sustainable. And the only thing that they can really do, other than adjust traditional rewards and incentives like remuneration, is to work with time. And think about how valuable that would be to you, Kathy, and to your producers and all of the people at Newzroom Afrika. If you were to ask them individually how they would take a day off, every single response would be unique. And that's what we're playing for. Universal productivity to the organization, but time off that is unique to the individual. It's a pretty powerful and universal incentive that you're playing for.
Okay, Karen, one last question. In South Africa, of course, we don't just deal with sort of, if you are fortunate enough to be in a job where you have access to leave, there's the prescribed leave days, and then there's also your public holidays. How does that factor into this pilot and research that has been done?
Kathy, we had a very entertaining month in April because essentially it was a 4-day work week every single week of April. And a lot of our organizations were like, what do we do? And we were like, well, actually the global policy is that if there is a bank or a public holiday in that work week, that counts as the day off for the organization. So now that's pretty easy in a ad agency or tax and advisory services, you know, that work Monday through Friday and don't work 24/7. So organizations that are always on 7 days a week, you know, that doesn't necessarily apply. But generally speaking, organizations where there is a public holiday in play would forego that day off as the official day off for that particular week. So you don't go and add a further 20% reduction of the work week. So you manage and plan, and I think, you know, you add load shedding to the mix. We might not know down to the minute when it's coming, but if you are flexible and adaptive with your thinking and you're able to scratch beneath the surface and, you know, download one of those apps, you pretty much can actually plan for when load shedding is going to hit, and you plan deep focus work, you change meetings, you change the times of your commute. And, you know, Kathy, I don't know, South Africans are so resilient. They're very innovative and flexible and agile in their thinking, and they've come up with some pretty creative solves. So, you know, the idea is nothing must happen at the expense of the organization. This has to be an ecosystem that is of benefit to both the employer and the employee. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So leave and pay are 100%. You don't touch it. It's 100% pay for 80% of the time in return for 100% productivity. And that is the model, and there's no negotiating that. So if the productivity dips, then we have to pull it back and we have to ask ourselves, why are we not being able to keep that productivity at the same level? So this is constantly refining ecosystem. Right. And you know what? I'm proud of my South African contingent. They have done some incredible work, and I'm really excited to be able to go, well, look at South Africa. You know, everybody, we're the first developing nation in the world that has done the 4-day week trial. And we've done it with huge success. And I cannot wait to tell you what the results are going to be at the end of September. Right. And we've already got 11 companies signed up for the second cohort that is starting onboarding in September to start the official pilot in November. And Kathy, a lot of the organizations that are on this trial will continue to experiment as they go forward. In other words, they will stay in a trial phase until such time as it can be made policy at some point.
All right, Karen, let's leave it there for tonight.